Hello and welcome to Game Shamus. Today we're investigating working memory. Now, working memory relies on something that we've covered in the past, which is the Atkinson-Shiffrin model. So classic research in working memory by George Miller has accurately described that we can remember to about 5 to 9 items at a time. If you think about the memorization of cell phone numbers, you'll notice that there are about 7 items there, plus the 3 area codes. Now, you can remember longer things than this, such as your social security number, but the thing is that they're actually broken up into chunks, and that's what I'm getting onto next, is called chunking. We can remember to about 4-letter acronyms or 4-digit acronyms pretty well, but after you start getting on that, like you say G, T, Z, W, Q, R, I, L, M, P, you're not going to remember that. You're going to stop by around remembering 4, maybe 5 of those things. And so that's chunking. Now, if you can make a relation between those chunks, say I show you're going to have a better time remembering, or I say 3 letters RMP at a time, such as GTQ, SVU, LNO, and then you recall as many of those as you can. I'll try that with something like CIA, FBI, USA, IRA. Remembering up to 7, give or take 2 items is something that was coined of magic number 7 by George Miller. In other classic research on working memory, there's the Brown, Peterson, and Peterson technique. And this technique involves the presentation of 3 items, then recall the originally presented items. So let's go over it again. Technique involves 1. Presentation of 3 items. 2. Count backwards by the... You're probably going to remember that pattern a lot better because those are acronyms that you're familiar with. You've made meaning out of those. The others were more nonsense syllables. The technique involves the presentation of 3 items, to count backwards by 3 for a specified period of time. 3. Recall originally presented items. Sorry, let me try this again. The technique involves the presentation of 3 items. The technique involves 1. The presentation of 3 items. 2. To count backwards by 3, or rather 3s, for a specified period of time. And 3. To recall the originally presented items. Counting backwards prevents rehearsal. So, the silent mental repetition of these items. Rehearsal refers to the silent mental repetition of items, revealed that the material held in the memory for less. So what this does, the Brown, Peterson, and Peterson technique does, is it revealed that material is held in memory for less than a minute, unless there is an encoding process, which goes either into working memory or long-term memory. Then there is the serial position effect. So what's that? Well, it's the tendency to recall the best. The serial position effect is where you have this tendency to recall the best first. The serial position effect is where you have the tendency to recall the first information presented and the last information presented the best. So say I give you a long list of words. I give you a list of 20 words. You're probably going to remember the first couple the best and have a high retention rate of that. If I have a group full of 30 people, they're going to remember the beginning words the best and the last the best. But in the middle, and probably right in the middle, you're going to see a large dip from beginning to middle. And then you're going to see a gradual retention rate of going back up. Then you count backwards by these 3 items for a specified period of time. Another research that is called the remembering up to 7. This will probably be about 7 items that you can remember very well. And this occurs because the items are rehearsed more and stored in the long-term memory. Think about when you're purposefully trying to remember something, you're probably going to remember, or you're probably going to rehearse the items, and by doing that, you're probably going to say, if you're remembering words, you're going to keep repeating the beginning words and just adding on the additional next word. After it gets plus 7, then you're going to start losing and saying, okay, I can't remember all of these. So you're going to start letting go of some of the information. So what is the size of the working memory? How many items make up the recency effect? I'd estimate actually the size of working memory is to be about 4 words. Why does that occur? Well, this is something called the primacy effect. The primacy effect is the ability to accurately recall first information. So why does this occur? Well, this occurs because of 2 things. One is the primacy effect. And when you think of primacy, think of a primal state, like towards the beginning. So the primacy effect is the ability to accurately recall information that is presented first, such as the items listed. Recency effect, likewise, is the ability to accurately recall items, but towards the end. And so recent items, that's why it's called the recency effect. The last items that you heard in the list were the most recent. So there's a thing called delay in the serial effect. Delay in the serial position effect, this happens because there is a lack of rehearsal that is available in the working memory. Classic research on working memory. Factors affecting working memory are chunking, pronunciation time, and semantic similarity. So if I said sweet, cake, pie, these items would be more easily rememberable than if I were to start using random words like semantic similarity affects the rehearsal or memorization. Pronunciation time. The longer it takes to pronounce the items, the lower our capacity. So if I say something like superalicalifragisticexpialidocious, well, we're going to have probably a much harder time remembering that than saying a word such as must. These results actually can also be found in short names versus long names, or numbers in different languages. Classic research on working memory also involves semantic similarity of the items in working memory. Semantics refers to the meaning of words and items. The uses are engineering, art, architecture, retaining image of a scene, finding your way from one location to another, video games, jigsaw puzzles, memes, mazes, and television. Brain imaging indicates that the areas to the right hemisphere of the optical lobe, frontal cortex, and frontal parietal lobe are activated when engaging in these tasks. Central executive function. This is the director/executive supervisor of your working memory. It chooses which issues deserve attention and selects a strategy. This has a limited ability to perform simultaneous tasks. This effect is due to the acoustic properties of the stimuli, the sound of the stimuli. There's something called proactive interference, which is a disruptive effect of prior learning on the ability to encode new information. So if I'm listing a bunch of words that are sweet, and you're categorizing these and you're listing these, but then suddenly you catch that I do something different, like I say garbage can. Well, you're probably going to remember garbage can because it stood out. So that is an example of proactive interference. Well, what is the release of proactive interference? That is the semantic similarity of items. So the release from proactive interference is the less similar items, which were more easily recalled. However, switching the category and type of new information can result in the release from proactive interference. What is the evidence of this? Well, working memory is not unitary. Example of this is the Operation Span task. Bradley and Hitch provided a SS with some random numbers and remembrance spatial reasoning task. SS performed almost identically to those not required to rehearse numbers. Provided evidence for separate verbal rehearsal and visual spatial judgment processes. Phonological loop. The phonological loop processes a limited number of sounds for a short period of time. The country memory task earlier provides evidence of the phonological loop's capacity. The effects found regardless of whether you actually pronounce words or use subvocalization, which is the pronunciation of words in your head. Phonological loop has research on acoustic confusions, a tendency to confuse similar sounding stimuli, like a list of letters or presented visually. So, you know how sometimes you confuse an A for an O if you don't notice very clearly that there's a stem off it. Our working memory consists of 4 components: the central executive, visospatial sketchpad, the episodic buffer, and the phonological loop. So 1, the central executive; 2, the visospatial sketchpad; 3, the episodic buffer; and 4, the phonological loop. So this requires SS to perform the 2 visuospatial sketchpads simultaneously. An example of this is to drive a car simulator while visualizing walkthrough in your house. Drive a car simulator while visualizing walking through your house. Some argue that these errors are product of rehearsal errors rather than the phonological loop. So ways that you use the phonological loop can be counting, reading, acquiring new vocabulary, learning foreign languages, mathematical calculations, problem-solving tasks, and complex task instructions. Neuroscience research, brain image indicates that the areas of the frontal lobe, left temporal lobe, and parietal lobe are active when engaging in these tasks. Visuospatial sketchpad stores the appearance and relative position of spatial things that you see. It also stores visual information encoded from verbal stimuli, what we quote-unquote see in our head. It's considered of similar sounding letters, others did not. SS made more errors recalling similar sounding letters. Our immediate memory is a multi-part system that temporarily holds and manipulates information as we can perform cognitive tasks. The emphasis is on the active manipulation of information in the working memory. Evidence for the visuospatial sketchpad comes from Bradley and Hitch in 1974 studies where they discussed earlier. The central executive integrates information from the phonological loop, the visuospatial sketchpad, and the episodic buffer, in addition to long-term memory. It functions to plan and coordinate tasks, but does not store information. No storing information. No. So this also has a limited capacity, which the limitation of the visuospatial sketchpad is that it is difficult to determine the variety of reasons. So Brandon Moore and colleagues developed a new procedure to overcome this tendency: say la 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 while looking at a complex stimulus. Episodic buffer integrates information from different modalities, both limited and temporary. The temporary storehouse where we can gather and combine information from the phonological loop, the visuospatial sketchpad, and the long-term memory. The difficulty in the research has been there's no standardized set of visual stimuli. Neuroscience research on the central executive has shown that brain imaging lesion studies have indicated that the frontal lobe is primarily responsible for the executive functioning. Tendency to provide names for visual stimuli, thus using the phonological loop instead. Product of rehearsal errors